Hello, everybody. I'm Brian Sethurst, and this is Allison Norrington, and welcome back to the Story Hour Part 2 with our guest, Allison.
Helen Situ of Big Tiny Sound.
Welcome back,
Hi.
Helen.
Thank you.
I must say, you look just as wonderful as you looked on our last episode.
A week ago.
So, all right. So, Allison, you have questions about distribution. I have questions about TikTok houses. So,
I have also questions about frequency and I have questions about trolls.
oh, fire away, Allison.
Okay, so Helen, in terms of frequency, I know this was something we were going to pick up on. I can tell, of course, that some of these creators are creating numerous posts a day on TikTok. And in terms of your advice to people that you work with, do you have any guidelines in terms of frequency? Because, of course, there is a case where too much is overkill and then not enough doesn't get seen. What are your thoughts in terms of frequency of posting?
Sure. So I think, in order to talk about frequency, it's also important to kind of cover how distribution works and how people consume content on TikTok. And so through TikTok, when you open up the app natively, you are immediately put on the For You page. The For You page is essentially a feed of content that TikTok's algorithm believes that you will enjoy or that you will consume. And so it learns this over time as it, understands what you watch over and over again, whether it's a video that's repeating. It also knows based on what you engage with in terms of likes or comments or shares. And over time, that starts to build up a profile of content that you will enjoy. And so for me, for example, that happens to be a ton of videos around cooking. For some reason, I absolutely love watching 30-second techniques or recipes. And that's just my favorite way to consume content.
Can I say I'm now worried because for me, it seems to be people that are getting the hairs from the inside of their nose.
But I'm not worried because I'm calling you, Helen, because I'm going to take the happenstance chef
There you go.
and put it into 30-second segments.
Yes, I would love that. That's definitely my favorite way to consume cooking content right
I can
now.
cut a pineapple in 30 seconds. Back to you, Allison.
So in general, like all the content is being consumed in this one feed, and I think with the feed, it doesn't necessarily index people that you follow. So even if you like creators, you follow them, they might not appear in your For You page that often. So it is continuously pushing new content out to you. So I think because the way that you consume content on TikTok, it is through an algorithmically based. It is giving somewhat of an equal chance to every video created. Like every video that's created has an opportunity to be shown to, say 100 people. And within those 100 people, if, a high percentage of them interacts with it or likes it or shares it, it continues to get distribution. And so with that, I think every single time you post a video, you have an opportunity to go viral or an opportunity to go and reach more people, new people as well. And so I think especially with TikTok versus if you look at Instagram or YouTube, there is a little bit of a benefit to doing a high frequency of videos because you aren't necessarily bombarding people who follow you with 10 videos of yourself. Like it will continuously be pushed to new people and people who are going to resonate with your content. If that's what it does, if they are enjoying it, if they learn something, they're entertained by it, they're curious about it, they'll keep watching and it'll keep going to new people. And so I think with the frequency, we see anything from people who post at least once a day to 10 times a day. We see people producing a ton of content across the board. And I think that if the content is resonating, then doing 10 videos a day is going to be great. And you're going to be able to leapfrog your growth and reach new people at a much, much faster pace than somebody who isn't. But if you're creating 10 videos, so go ahead.
It's not an overkill, right? So my thoughts on can there be too much doesn't actually seem to exist.
It seems like there's more of a benefit to doing more and having more opportunities to try something and reach a different audience. I would say that, if you're doing the same 10 videos 10 times in a row and they're just each time is getting incrementally better, but it's not a different type of video, then that strategy is probably not as advantageous as if you're trying 10 different formats with, a lot of effort into each of them and you're trying to see which one sticks and which one works.
Mm-hmm.
I have a cultural question here, a little bit off the track, but celebrity culture has really taken a hit um, during COVID for a lot of reasons. Do you think that this democratization of content and fame, I guess, do you think this is replacing celebrity culture? Because if a celebrity tries to get into this, I know Tiffany Haddish has gotten into new platforms, but if an old school celebrity tries to get into this, it's like, hey, get out of our clubhouse. Um, but so the question I'm asking is, do you think that Andy Warhol, was it Andy Warhol who said everybody would be famous for 15 minutes? I think it was I think it was him. Anyway, is this replacing celebrity culture, at least within another generation in Gen Z?
I don't know if it's going to replace it because I feel like we do still continue to see outsized celebrity be born out of the platform that then carries over into other places. Like, for example, the Charlie D'Amelios and the Addison Rays. Like, Addison Rae is now, a huge celebrity. She is constantly being photographed with the Kardashians. She's starring in a new movie. There's a lot of room to break into the traditional celebrity world as well. But I do think that going off of your quote around that, that 15 minutes of fame, that in terms of like perception of oneself and mental health and care around that, I think that will be a really interesting area to watch because TikTok does allow this creation of immense virality through a single 15-second video that you might continue to chase for a very long time. And you do notice that with certain accounts, like they get a viral video and then they will continue to copy that format over and over again because they knew that one format worked. But sometimes it plays out or sometimes they need another twist on it. And I think that can be tough for some creators to find something that works really well one time, but then to constantly be chasing it again. Like there is an opportunity every single time that you post a video that it could be seen by millions of people. And when that happens, it can propel you from, anywhere from 500 followers to 100,000 followers overnight. But then what do you do after that? Then I think there's also can be a lot of built up pressure or a lot of inspiration in many different ways to kind of continue to push that because it did happen sort of overnight.
That's interesting because I remember a few years ago when the YouTube creator spaces were open and the one in LA had recently opened and I went in there for a couple of days doing some training with some of the creators in there. And I was literally going in and out different rooms. And in some of the rooms, they were like, guys with their guitar with their feet up on the desk. And I'd walk in and ask them some questions about their brand and their brand values and what could they say they would always do and what could they say they would never do. Like what kind of sponsorships were they looking for? Who were they talking to? Who was their audience? And I found a real almost like 50-50 split amongst those creators of the ones that were like, yeah, like we don't care, we'll do anything, we've just we're going to go with it, we're on the crest of this wave. And then the others that were really clear about the answers to those questions, who their audience were. They would always work with these kinds of brands because of what they represented and stood for. They would never work with those kinds of brands because of the same reasons. And I felt the ones that had a longer term strategy were the ones that I saw, at least at the time, escalate and grow. Because it's exactly what you say, like, what's the game plan? Like, what does success look like? And I think that's so different for every storyteller. For some people, it's hits and views. For some, it's the money. For others, it's like longevity. And yeah, that's a really interesting point, I think, that you've raised. Once you've corralled this audience or community, how long do you keep doing that? Like, what do you do it for? Where does it lead? What do you want from it? In terms of how you work with creators, are they the kinds of questions that come up frequently?
That is the question that we have discussed with, some of our creators around this idea of like creator burnout. I think especially, tying back to your previous question, Allison, where you talked about frequency, if it is a platform that in ways rewards you, in terms of quantity of tons of different videos and constantly feeling this need to produce and interact with people and continuously put yourself out there, I think that, more and more as we look at the future of creators and how this continues to become a more viable career path for people growing into it right now, creator burnout is a huge topic because like you need to have sort of a direction of, what motivates you, what brings you joy, and doing this every single day continuously and being your own boss. And it can be lonely at times. And so I think that kind of segues into another topic that I know you wanted to talk about, Brian, which is creator content houses and creator collectives. I think that YouTube really pioneered a lot of this. I mean, I think Vine also pioneered a lot of this. I know that there was some apartment complex in LA on Vine Street that really saw a ton of creators come and move in from all over the United States to be able to collaborate on videos together. And so I think that's a piece of it.
I know that there are companies where YouTube is concerned that that actually rent mansions.
Yep.
And aggregate these content creators and put those. Is that happening with TikTok as well?
Yeah, that's definitely happening in TikTok. So pre-pandemic, I think one of the houses I was also really intrigued by is the Fenty Beauty House. So Fenty is a beauty brand headed by Rihanna, but they actually brought together a collective of diverse beauty, like TikTokers, and house them and put them all together to collaborate on content. You also see that with like talent agencies who put together all the creators with the Sway House, who have now broken out and become, huge in their own respects outside of the TikTok world as well. I think that they're doing angel investing in the startup world. They're getting very involved in Clubhouse. They have their own e-commerce brand, and they're really diversifying outside of TikTok, although that was the initial platform that sort of catapulted them into fame.
It's interesting to me, first of all, just in my own personal experience, just putting out an episode every Thursday, and Allison and I too, putting out episodes every Thursday, for me, when filming the Happenstance Chef, I mean, that's like 5 episodes in a day. And it takes me 3 days to figure out exactly how I'm going to do it and the most efficient way to film it. And then we shoot on a Sunday, and then on Monday, I'm flat out because it's been a 12-hour day. And
Right.
this obligation is like, once you make the commitment. So if I'm a content creator, maybe I'm better off inside a TikTok, maybe I'm better off inside a creator house, because you can play off one another. You have brainstorming meetings, maybe it's their own writer's room inside these houses where they figure out what they're going to do. That would be an interesting discussion for the writer's
Yeah.
room, actually, to get a bunch of TikTokers on talking about that. But that obligation, once you set that bar, like, I'm producing something every day, that's a commitment that you make. And then you have to stick with that commitment, because well, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but now if you're a TikTok creator, you've created a set of expectations for your audience. And so you have to consistently not only hit the distribution mark in those expectations, but hit the quality mark. Because suppose you have a big fail, and it offends somebody, you make one wrong move. It just seems like it's such a commitment.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of commitment. There's a lot. I mean, that goes back to like really wanting to understand like your audience and who you stand for and what you want to work toward. Because I think that at the end of the day, it is a ton of work. And again, with these content houses, like a lot of them are, sort of supported by other organizations, whether it's a talent agency or company, a sponsorship of sorts. But the better organized ones do really have these sort of brainstorming sessions where they do make commitments to create X number of pieces of content every day. They're trying to hit certain views for a week or certain likes for a week. Like, they're trying to hit very, very substantial goals every single week. And that is something that I've talked to you about with a couple people who do run houses, that they do have goals. They do sort of collaborate on story arcs and video ideas together. And I think that to your earlier point, Brian, around building these worlds where they're the main character and then the audience is, one character in that world, I think having a content house makes it that much more real feeling. Sort of like if you watch.
It's kind of like Real World.
Yeah, you really do see a number of people. They all have different storylines. Some of them have, if they do it well, some of them have secrets. And sometimes those secrets are shared with the audience before other members in the house. And that continues to sort of build out the intrigue and like the mystery in the dynamics of the group.
It's kind of interesting that it takes the Real World format, the MTV Real World format, and then the Big Brother format, all of these formats of throwing a bunch of people in a house, and and actually sticks within the same format, but compresses the time. It's actually fascinating because it's like we always say, it's not the story, it's not the what of the story that tells, it's the how you tell it that tells. And this seems like one of those perfect examples. When you talk to an artist, do they want to know if this creator, they may have 100,000 followers, do they want to know if your opinion, if this creator is going to have legs? And the extent, oh, God bless you, if this creator is going to have legs, and if it's going to be, is it a long-term relationship? How long is there a contract? How does this work?
Yeah, so with ours, there aren't any exclusive contracts between the creators and the artists. I do think that some artists do work with creators long term, but typically those are like the creators are in that superstar sphere of people who will have 10, 20, 30, 40 million plus followers who can really catapult somebody into the TikTok world from a huge standpoint. And sponsorships for those types of folks, we work primarily with smaller creators around the 100,000 to like 5 to 10 million range. But I think when you get past 15 million for followers, one TikTok video could be tens of thousands of dollars. And I think that the best way to work with them over time is to have that relationship where they can help build a community around your music and your following. But with the way that we work with our creators is more, they will work with the same creators over and over and over again over time. But I think that something we also start to see with how artists like to work with our creators on our platform is they like creators who typically work with the same genre of music. They might want creators who typically work with people who do alternative rock in their videos, or lots of R&B, or lots of newer artists. Like, they like to sort of match up with these curators of music over time as well.
Because if you have if your followers are on hip hop, I mean, and that's what they love, they're going to follow you, and that community is going to expand. So that's something else, that's this category of that you're falling into that people will expect. So if you're constantly doing your dance to hip hop, or you're doing your dance to sea shanties, you're going to have this segment of the audience. And if you have 100,000 followers, then Helen, that Big Tiny Sound, that this is 100,000 people who like this genre of music.
But hip hop as well and rap have historically been brilliant for collaborations and rising up new talent. And that's what so much of that industry has been built on, is those collabs and like cherry picking and helping rise up people that aren't so well known. And I might be wrong, but I can't think of a music genre that's done that as well as rap and hip hop has done. So I mean, it kind of is baked into the DNA actually of the culture, at least in my point of view, for that type of music. And do you know what else I feel? Like, we've seen platforms come and go, and I'm sure we'll continue to do that. But I do feel that we've had a year of COVID now, a year of lockdown, a year of everything being different.
Now.
I wonder whether that's created a window of opportunity, not just for TikTok, but for the creators within it. Because I get a sense, at least globally across the countries, territories, and storytellers that I work with, that there's a certain sense of the playing field being a little bit leveled off, because people have been at home a lot. They've overdosed on so much that's there that they didn't have a chance to watch before, whether that's on Amazon Prime or Netflix or any series of streaming channels or whatever it might be, right? So I think people are more like clued up and current with what's already out there in terms of content. But also there's this sense of so much production initially stopped, obviously, because of COVID and restrictions. And I know there's been a pickup now again of productions happening. I saw a big surge of gaming and animation. But I feel there's an exciting moment of the playing field leveled away from the big players in Hollywood or wherever, that has allowed this rise up of like independently created storytelling and content. And there's been attempts of this before, of course, with other platforms, but there was also always the main distraction of the big guns, the big networks and the new stuff coming out. We've had that pretty much halted for a year. And I think that has created that little bit of headway that seems to be happening with TikTok.
And Allison, just to back up your point, I mean, you see what happened with Quibi, where
Right,
it's here we're going to get these big stars in here and we're going to capitalize on short form content on the mobile phone. But there's
right.
something that is inherently authentic about TikTok that you actually cannot, you can't capture that except on the platform.
I mean, a lot of that, as you're mentioning, like having so much production value, having huge celebrities in it. I think, especially in this past year, we're also voraciously consuming content. I don't think that even in a world where every Quibi show was a hit, they could not produce it quick enough for us to consume it, especially in these very short format um, pieces. And so I think that at the end of the day, it's so fascinating to watch TikTok videos because they feel so genuine and so authentic, and so many of them do sort of play off fairly like low production value types of tricks, like whether it's just using a ring light instead of studio lights, having a tiny mic that you hold in your hand as like a audio equipment instead of having boom mic. You
And
sort
the
of
editing, the editing.
the editing, everything is so quick, so fast, and so interesting, and it's held from these like first person perspectives a lot of the time, where even cuts and transitions are just you moving the phone around and changing it up. And I think all of that lends itself to kind of just taking another step into somebody's world in a really authentic way. And I think even as you mentioned, Brian, where a lot of these, especially with the content houses, are around this format of reality TV, or this type of real world. What's fascinating, and I think pulls so many of us in deeper, is the fact that we don't believe that there is a producer somewhere also pulling the strings and the stories.
I was going to
Like
say, what you
some
don't
level,
have is reality television editors, as
yeah,
they're
like
traditionally
everything
known,
feels like
who
it's
are
happening
or putting the story together that
Right.
they see instead of what actually might be happening. But in
Yeah.
here, the creators have more control over what they're creating and what they're putting out. So they are the
they have
producers
all
and
the
they are the editors.
Yeah, in many ways they have all the control because they are creating, the scenario, they're filming it, they're directing it if they're not filming it, they're editing it, they're working with their friends, they're collaborating in tight, peer groups for creating this content. And I think that, in some ways, like celebrity culture has made so many of us believe that we could be famous, or that we want to be famous, or to be seen in this way. And yet social media has democratized that in a way where you can also control your own narratives. And I think that that's something that's been brought up a little bit more recently, again, with, like the Britney Spears documentary. I haven't had a chance to watch it yet, but I think that, some of the conversations that I was seeing around it coming out and being this like cultural moment of how horrible it was that this happened, and how much, I think what we see looking back on it now is, how big of a gap existed for her to control her own narrative in any way. Every point of communication, of broadcast media, of distribution, of reaching her audiences was mediated through some other form that was, probably much more tightly controlled by like PR teams, communication teams, managers, in a way that today there might still be some of that guidance around how celebrities interact with their fans and their audiences, but I think that more than ever there is a much more direct channel of communication now, and you see that with bigger and bigger artists like Billie Eilish. And like she's very authentic and very open. She tells super funny stories with her audience that are completely unrelated to her craft. Like I just like fell out of bed laughing a couple of weeks ago when she told this story through like 5 minutes on Instagram stories of how her dog had to go to the hospital because he swallowed a chew toy. And it was just like this very real, authentic story from her life that doesn't, that she gets to completely control the way that she tells it, the way that she comes off. And it was just her like in bed laying down filming it. And it was so natural and so vulnerable at the same
I
time.
think
I loved it.
they do hit that point in the documentary, but I think you've just pointed out like what is the distinguishing characteristics of a platform like TikTok or even Twitter, where the audience will know if they're manipulated because of the level of authenticity that's always present, and the fact that they can control their own narrative. And most people can. I mean, yes, you risk a horrible backlash or a horrible reaction for a comment that you've said, but you're getting, no one's putting a lens in front of you to
Right.
uh, to present something that's not authentic. We could actually go on for a long time. I'd love to end this segment and today with just where you see this going in the next couple of years. Like, this is a cultural phenomenon. So now Clubhouse is on board, seems to be another cultural phenomenon. And I'm sure when we look back in time, this is a great record of our culture for the last year, how people were creative. It's like a historical archive of how we behaved and what happened during this time. Where do you see this developing in the next year? TikTok primarily.
Yeah. I mean, I think that something that I've been thinking about a lot recently that's been really interesting is, yeah, kind of bringing together this holistic view of all these different platforms that allow us to be our own media companies in a certain way. But I do think that a trend that we're moving toward is the idea that continuously younger generations do want to pursue this as some sort of full-time, or at least some sort of viable path toward a career in this field. And I think what's been really interesting, and especially in the last couple of weeks with Twitter's announcements, is that they are starting to focus. I think platforms are starting to focus on more monetization strategies that are built in. I think that something that happens right now is, over the past couple of years, I think also fueled by Stripe and this ability to build payments into all these different applications online, is that everybody's been trying to offload their audiences into paid subscriptions, whether that's a Patreon, a Substack, OnlyFans, which we haven't touched on, which is also a huge phenomenon within the last year. But I think that it's super interesting to look forward and see that as we get more and more of these platforms, and the ability to reach a larger audience becomes in some ways more equitable in terms of TikTok and how you can do it in every single video that you upload. I think what is really important to keep these viable and continue to have a diverse array of storytelling within these platforms is the ability to allow creators to make a living from what they're doing on these platforms, whether that's through tipping mechanisms on the platform or subscriptions. I think just a note that super follow is a feature that they're building at Twitter, where you can super follow somebody's account to pay them, $4.99 every month to read their tweets, or some sort of subscription. So, subscription is the most interesting way of doing this because it allows you to have some idea of what you're going to make next month and something to build toward. And so I think that's something that I really start to see more of, and I'm very hopeful in seeing platforms sort of start to pay its creators and start to give back to its creators more, rather than simply being this distribution channel now that we have so many to choose from.
If you're a great creator and you're charging $1 a month and you have 100,000 followers, but I think once, I'm getting into a larger discussion, but I think once you establish your price level, you're not going to be able to go anywhere for a while. So that first price that you have to set, you have to be. So whole other discussion. I would love to discuss OnlyFans. That's something else I would love to talk about.
We didn't touch on that at all.
Yeah, I know. So maybe we'll have you back to discuss OnlyFans and other platforms. But Helen, what a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us on the Story Hour today. Allison, anything you'd like to add?
Only that we never talked about trolls, but we'll save that for another day as well.
Oh, so now trolls and OnlyFans. There's something about the intersection between those two that'll probably make a very good show. Thank you for joining us today, Helen, and thank you, audience, for coming and joining the Story Hour. Be sure to like, subscribe, hit the bell if you want to know when the next episode is. Thank you so much, Helen. I adore you. One of the great things about VR was meeting you. So thanks for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me on today, Brian and Allison. This was so much fun.
You're welcome. Bye.